When Kate cried before the world, a royal baby's first day at Westminster, morning sun cast long shadows across the ancient stones of Westminster Abbey as Catherine, the Princess of Wales, stood before the massive oak doors. Her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted the delicate lace christening gown that had been in the royal family for generations. Today was different from all the other royal ceremonies she had attended. Today she would present her newborn daughter to the world. For the first time, the weight of tradition pressed down on her shoulders like a heavy cloak. She could hear the murmur of hundreds of guests already seated inside the Abbey, their voices creating a low hum that seemed to vibrate through the ancient walls. Photographers lined the streets outside, their cameras ready to capture every moment of this historic day. The entire nation was watching, waiting to see the newest member of the royal family. Catherine's mother, Carol Middleton, stood beside her, offering quiet words of encouragement. "Remember, darling, you've done this before," she whispered, referring to the christenings of George and Charlotte. But Catherine knew this felt different. Princess Helena, just 6 weeks old, seemed so fragile in her arms. The baby's tiny fingers gripped the edge of the christening gown, and her dark eyes looked up at her mother with complete trust. The Archbishop of Canterbury approached them, ceremonial robes rustling against the stone floor. He had conducted countless christenings in his career, but royal ceremonies always carried extra significance. He smiled warmly at Catherine, understanding the mixture of joy and nervousness that every parent felt on such an occasion. "Your Royal Highness," he said gently, "are you ready?" Catherine nodded, though her heart was racing. She had prepared for this moment for weeks, yet nothing could have prepared her for the overwhelming emotions that swept through her as she looked down at her sleeping daughter. The baby's face was peaceful, unaware of the historic moment she was about to be part of. Catherine thought about her own childhood, how different it had been from the life that awaited Helena. Prince William appeared at her side, having just finished greeting the Archbishop and other church officials. He looked elegant in his formal morning coat, but Catherine could see the same nervous energy in his eyes that she felt in her own heart. They had been through royal ceremonies together many times, but presenting their children to the world never became routine. Each time felt like the first time. The great doors of Westminster Abbey began to open slowly, their ancient hinges creaking with the weight of centuries. Light flooded through the entrance, and Catherine could see the magnificent interior of the Abbey stretching before them. The congregation rose to their feet, hundreds of faces turning toward the royal family. The moment had arrived as they stepped forward into the Abbey. Catherine felt a surge of emotion that caught her completely off guard. The sight of so many people gathered to witness her daughter's christening, the beauty of the ancient building, and the weight of the moment combined to create a feeling she had never experienced before. Tears began to well up in her eyes. Despite all her preparation and royal training, the organ began to play, filling the vast space with music that seemed to come from the very stones themselves. Catherine's steps became uncertain as the emotion overwhelmed her. She had attended countless royal events, had been photographed thousands of times. But this moment felt more personal and profound than anything she had experienced. This was her daughter, her baby, being welcomed into a tradition that stretched back hundreds of years. William noticed his wife's distress and moved closer, offering his support without words. The royal protection officers, trained to handle any situation, watched carefully as Catherine struggled to compose herself. The Archbishop, seeing what was happening, slowed his pace slightly, giving the royal couple a moment to gather themselves. The cameras captured every second of this unexpected display of raw emotion from the usually composed Princess of Wales. Around the world, people watching on television saw a mother's love and vulnerability in a way they had never witnessed from a member of the royal family. Catherine's tears were not just tears of joy, but tears of overwhelming responsibility, love, and the realization that her daughter's life would never be entirely her own. As they made their way down the aisle toward the altar, Catherine whispered a silent prayer for strength, for wisdom, and for the ability to guide her daughter through the extraordinary life that lay ahead of her. When Kate cried before the world, a royal baby's first day at Westminster, the weight of 1,000 eyes followed Catherine as she walked down the aisle of Westminster Abbey. Each step echoed in the vast space, mixing with the gentle organ music that filled the air. Princess Helena remained peacefully asleep in her mother's arms, completely unaware of the historic moment unfolding around her. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell with each breath, her small hands still clutching the delicate fabric of the christening gown. Catherine tried to focus on her breathing, a technique she had learned years ago during her first royal engagements. But the emotions threatening to overwhelm her were unlike anything she had experienced before. She could feel the tears gathering in her eyes again, and she knew that millions of people around the world were watching this moment unfold on their television screens. The congregation included members of royal families from across Europe, government, officials, and close friends of the family. Catherine could see her sister Pippa in the front row, offering an encouraging smile. Prince Harry and Meghan were there too, along with other members of the royal family who had gathered to witness this sacred ceremony. The presence of so many loved ones should have been comforting, but instead, it made Catherine feel even more emotional as they approached the altar. Catherine caught sight of the baptismal font that had been used for royal christenings for over a century. The silver font gleamed in the light streaming through the Abbey's magnificent stained glass windows. It had been filled with holy water from the River Jordan, continuing a tradition that connected her daughter to generations of royal history. The Archbishop took his position at the altar, his voice carrying clearly through the Abbey as he began the ceremony. "We are gathered here today to welcome Princess Helena into the Christian faith," he announced, his words formal yet warm. Catherine felt William's hand on her back, a gentle reminder that she was not alone in this moment. The first part of the ceremony proceeded smoothly. The Archbishop spoke about the significance of baptism and the responsibilities of parenthood. Catherine listened to every word, trying to focus on the meaning behind the ritual rather than the overwhelming attention. Focused on her family, she thought about her own faith journey and how she wanted to guide Helena's spiritual development. When the time came for the actual baptism, Catherine stepped forward with her daughter. The baby had begun to stir, perhaps sensing the change. In her surroundings, her tiny eyes opened, and she looked around with the curious expression that only newborns possess. The sight of her daughter's innocent face made Catherine's heart swell with love and protectiveness. The Archbishop gently took Princess Helena from Catherine's arms. The baby remained calm, seeming to sense the solemnity of the moment. As the holy water touched her forehead, Helena made a small sound that echoed through the Abbey. It was not a cry of distress, but rather a soft coo that seemed to acknowledge the significance of what was happening. Catherine watched as the water trickled down her daughter's forehead, and in that moment, she felt a profound connection too. All the royal mothers who had stood in this same place before her. She thought about Queen Elizabeth II, who had been christened in this very Abbey decades ago. She thought about Diana, William's mother, and how she had felt during William's christening. The weight of this lineage, this continuation of tradition, suddenly felt both beautiful and overwhelming. The Archbishop's voice filled the space as he pronounced the words of baptism. "I baptize you, Helena, Elizabeth Catherine, in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit." Each word seemed to resonate through the ancient stones, marking the moment when the princess officially became part of the Church of England. As the ceremony continued, Catherine found herself thinking about her daughter's future. What kind of world would Helena grow up in? What challenges would she face as a member of the royal family? How could Catherine protect her daughter's childhood while preparing her for the responsibilities that lay ahead? The emotional weight of these thoughts, combined with the beauty of the ceremony and the significance of the moment, proved too much for Catherine to bear. Despite her years of training in maintaining royal composure, despite her experience with public appearances, she felt the tears beginning to flow freely down her cheeks. The cameras captured every moment of this raw, human display of emotion. Around the world, people watched as the Princess of Wales showed a vulnerability that made her more relatable than ever before. Here was a mother, overwhelmed by love and responsibility, experiencing one of the most important moments of her life. In front of millions of strangers, when Kate cried before the world, a royal baby's first day at Westminster, the tears streaming down Catherine's face caught the light from the stained glass windows, creating small rainbows on her cheeks. She had not expected this overwhelming surge of emotion, and she struggled to maintain the composed demeanor that had become her trademark over the years. The Archbishop, noticing her distress, offered her a gentle nod of understanding while continuing the ceremony with practiced grace. Princess Helena, now back in her mother's arms, seemed to sense the change in the atmosphere. The baby's dark eyes looked up at Catherine with an expression that seemed almost knowing. It was as if she understood that this moment was important, that something significant was happening in her young life. Catherine looked down at her daughter and felt a fresh wave of love wash over her. William stepped closer to his wife, his presence offering silent support. He had seen Catherine handle countless difficult situations with grace and strength, but he had never seen her this emotionally overwhelmed in public. He understood the weight of the moment and the complex feelings that came with introducing another child to the royal way of life. His own childhood had been lived under constant scrutiny, and he knew the challenges that lay ahead for Helena. The congregation watched in respectful silence as the ceremony continued. Many of them were parents themselves and could understand the emotions that Catherine was experiencing. A sight of the usually composed Princess of Wales showing such raw emotion made the moment feel more intimate and personal. Despite the grandeur of the setting, Queen Elizabeth II, seated in the front row, observed the scene with the wisdom of someone who had witnessed many royal christenings over the decades. She had seen her own children and grandchildren go through this same ceremony, and she understood the mixture of joy and responsibility that came with welcoming a new generation into the royal family. Her eyes held a gentle understanding as she watched Catherine struggle with her emotions. The Archbishop's voice continued to fill the Abbey. As he spoke about the importance of family and community in raising a child, his words seemed to speak directly to Catherine's heart, reminding her that she was not alone in this enormous responsibility. The royal family, the church, and the nation would all play a role in Helena's upbringing and development. As the ceremony progressed, Catherine began to find her composure. She wiped her tears with a handkerchief that William discreetly offered her, and she focused on the Archbishop's words about hope and faith. The music from the choir seemed to wrap around her like a comforting embrace, and she felt her breathing become more steady. The moment came for the signing of the baptismal register, a formal part of the ceremony that would officially record Princess Helena's christening. Catherine watched as the Archbishop carefully wrote her daughter's name in the ancient book, each letter marking another step in the princess's journey into royal life. The sight of her daughter's name being recorded in the same book that contained the names of kings and queens throughout history filled Catherine with a sense of awe. During this quieter part of the ceremony, Catherine had a moment to collect herself. She looked around the Abbey, taking in the magnificent architecture and the faces of the people who had gathered to witness this moment. She saw her parents, William's family, their closest friends, and representatives from across the Commonwealth. All of these people had come to welcome Helena into the world. Catherine felt grateful for their presence. The baby remained remarkably calm throughout the ceremony, as if she sensed the importance of the occasion. Occasionally she would make small sounds or move her tiny hands, but she never cried or became fussy. Catherine marveled at her daughter's peaceful demeanor and wondered if it was a sign of the strength and grace that she hoped Helena would possess throughout her life. As the ceremony neared its conclusion, the Archbishop offered a blessing for the royal family. His words spoke of protection, wisdom, and guidance for the parents as they raised their daughter. Catherine felt the weight of these words and the responsibility they represented. She knew that raising a royal child was unlike raising any other child, and she felt both determined and humbled by the task ahead. The final hymn began to play, and the congregation rose to their feet. Catherine stood with Helena in her arms, feeling more composed than she had earlier in the ceremony. As the music filled the Abbey with a sense of celebration and joy, marking the successful completion of this sacred ritual. As the final notes echoed through the ancient building, Catherine felt a sense of peace settle over her. When Kate cried before the world, a royal baby's first day at Westminster, the ceremony had concluded. But the most challenging part of the day was just beginning. Catherine knew that in moments, she would have to walk back down the aisle of Westminster Abbey past hundreds of guests and cameras, while carrying her newly christened daughter. The thought of facing the world's media and the crowds gathered outside. The Abbey made her stomach flutter with nervous energy. The Archbishop approached. The royal family, with a warm smile, offering his personal congratulations on the successful christening. Princess Helena was wonderfully behaved, he said to Catherine, his kind eyes acknowledging the emotional journey she had just experienced. You should be very proud. Catherine managed to smile in return, grateful for his gentle words during what had been an overwhelming experience. As the royal family prepared to leave the altar area, Catherine could see the guests beginning to stir in their seats. The formal ceremony was over, but the public part of the day was far from finished. She would need to face the crowds outside, pose for the official photographs, and attend the reception that had been planned for family and close friends. William walked beside her, occasionally glancing at Helena, who had fallen asleep once again in her mother's arms. The baby's peaceful expression seemed to contrast sharply with the controlled chaos that surrounded royal events. Her tiny face was completely relaxed, unaware of the significance of the day or the attention that would follow her throughout her life. As they began their walk back down the aisle, Catherine felt the weight of every gaze upon her. The guests stood respectfully as the royal family passed, but she could sense the curiosity and attention that followed their every move. The cameras at the back of the Abbey captured each step, and Catherine knew that these images would be broadcast around the world within hours. The journey down the aisle seemed to take forever, though it was only a few minutes. Catherine tried to maintain her composure, but she could feel the emotional exhaustion from the ceremony beginning to take its toll. Her legs felt slightly unsteady, and she was grateful for William's steady presence beside her. The weight of Helena in her arms, though the baby was small, seemed to grow heavier with each step. Halfway down the aisle, Catherine caught sight of some familiar faces in the congregation. I saw her brother James, who offered her an encouraging nod, and several of her closest friends who had traveled from across the country to be present for this special day. Their presence reminded her that despite the formal nature of the occasion, this was ultimately about family and love. The great doors of Westminster Abbey came into view, and Catherine could see the bright sunlight streaming through the opening. Beyond those doors waited the world's media, crowds of well-wishers, and the next phase of this very public day. She took a deep breath, trying to prepare herself for the intensity of the attention that awaited them outside. As they approached the doors, Catherine could hear the sound of the crowd gathered outside. The cheers and calls grew louder as people realized that the royal family was about to emerge. She could hear camera shutters clicking in rapid succession, even though the photographers were still some distance away. The sound made her heart race, and she instinctively held Helena a little closer to her chest. The royal protection officers who had been positioned throughout the Abbey now moved into formation around the family. Their presence was reassuring, but it also served as a reminder of the level of public interest and scrutiny that would always be part of Helena's life. Catherine thought about her own children, George and Charlotte, and how they had gradually learned to navigate the public attention that came with their royal status. Just before stepping outside, Catherine paused for a moment to check on Helena. The baby was still sleeping peacefully, her tiny chest rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Catherine adjusted the christening gown carefully, making sure that every fold was perfect for the photographs that would be taken outside. She knew that these images would become part of the historical record. Documenting this important day in the royal family's history, William placed a gentle hand on her shoulder, offering a moment of connection and support before they faced the crowds. "Are you ready?" he asked quietly, his voice barely audible over the sounds from outside. Catherine nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure she was ready for what came next. Nothing could truly prepare someone for the intensity of public scrutiny that accompanied major royal events. The moment arrived when they stepped through the doors of Westminster Abbey and into the bright afternoon sunlight. The roar of the crowd was immediate and overwhelming, hundreds of people cheering and calling out congratulations. The flash of cameras was almost blinding, and Catherine had to resist the urge to shield her eyes as she carefully carried Helena down the steps. When Kate cried before the world, a royal baby's first day at Westminster, the Afternoon sun was surprisingly warm as Catherine stepped onto the stone steps of Westminster Abbey. The contrast between the cool, quiet interior of the ancient building and the bright, noisy world outside was jarring. Hundreds of people had gathered behind barriers, waving flags and holding signs welcoming Princess Helena to the world. The enthusiasm of the crowd was touching, but also overwhelming for a mother holding her 6-week-old daughter. Catherine carefully descended the steps, acutely aware that every movement was being captured by dozens of cameras. The photographers called out instructions and encouragement, but their voices blended into a constant hum of activity. She focused on her footing, knowing that a stumble or fall would be replayed endlessly on news channels around the world. The responsibility of carrying not just her daughter, but the dignity of the royal family weighed heavily on her shoulders. Princess Helena stirred slightly in her mother's arms, perhaps responding to the change in light and sound. Her tiny eyes opened for a moment, taking in the bright world around her with the unfocused gaze of a newborn. Catherine looked down at her daughter and felt a surge of protective instinct. This little person, so innocent and vulnerable, was already the subject of international attention and speculation about her future role in the monarchy. William walked beside Catherine, occasionally waving to the crowd and offering smiles to the photographers. He had grown up with this level of public attention and had learned to navigate it with apparent ease. But Catherine could see the tension in his shoulders and knew that he was equally concerned about protecting their daughter from the more intrusive aspects of royal life. The official photographers were positioned at the bottom of the steps, ready to capture the formal portraits that would be distributed to newspapers and magazines around the world. Catherine knew that these images would be scrutinized and analyzed, with every detail of her appearance and Helena's christening gown being discussed by fashion experts and royal watchers as they reached the designated spot for photographs. Catherine felt Helena beginning to wake up more fully. The baby's small movements and soft sounds were barely noticeable to the crowd, but Catherine could sense her daughter's growing awareness of her surroundings. She gently adjusted the christening gown and spoke softly to Helena, hoping to keep her calm during the photo session. The lead photographer called out polite instructions, asking the royal family to move slightly to catch the best light. Catherine complied, but she could feel her emotional composure beginning to slip again. The combination of exhaustion, overwhelming love for her daughter, and the pressure of the public moment was taking its toll. She blinked rapidly, trying to prevent fresh tears from forming. The crowd continued to cheer and call out congratulations, their voices creating a wall of sound that seemed to press against Catherine from all sides. She could hear individual voices calling her name and Helena's name, people expressing their joy and excitement about the newest royal baby. The warmth of their reception was genuinely touching, but it also made Catherine feel exposed and vulnerable. During a brief pause in the photography, Catherine caught sight of a small child in the crowd, holding a hand-drawn sign that read, "Welcome Princess Helena." The innocence and genuine joy on the child's face reminded Catherine of why these public ceremonies mattered. Despite the pressure and scrutiny, these moments connected the royal family to the people they served, creating shared experiences that brought the nation together. Helena began to make small sounds, not crying, but clearly responding to the stimulation around her. Catherine instinctively began to rock her gently, a natural maternal response that was captured by the cameras. The sight of the Princess of Wales comforting her baby daughter created some of the most touching images of the day, showing the universal nature of a mother's love. The formal photography session continued for several more minutes, with the photographers capturing images of the royal family from different angles. Catherine maintained her composure as best she could, but she was acutely aware that her earlier tears had been noticed and photographed. She wondered how these images would be interpreted and what stories would be written about her. Its emotional response to the day. As the session drew to a close, Catherine felt a mixture of relief and continued nervousness. The public part of the day was almost over, but she knew that the reception and private family gatherings still awaited them. She looked forward to having a quieter moment with Helena, away from the cameras and crowds, where she could simply be a mother celebrating her daughter's special day. The royal protection officers began to move the family toward their waiting car, signaling that it was time to leave Westminster Abbey. Catherine took one last look at the crowd, many of whom were still cheering and waving. Despite the challenges of the day, she felt grateful for the warmth and support that had been shown to her family. When Kate cried before the world, a royal baby's first day at Westminster, the ride back to Kensington Palace was quiet and peaceful, a stark contrast to the public ceremony they had just left behind. Catherine sat in the back seat of the royal car, finally able to hold Helena without the pressure of cameras and crowds. The baby had fallen into a deep sleep, exhausted by her first major public appearance. Catherine studied her daughter's peaceful face, marveling at how serene she looked after such an eventful day. William sat beside her, his formal morning coat now feeling less restrictive as they traveled through the streets of London. He occasionally glanced at his wife and daughter, understanding the complex emotions that Catherine had experienced throughout the day. The weight of introducing another child to royal life was something they both felt deeply, and he admired Catherine's strength in handling such a challenging situation with grace. As they passed through the London streets, Catherine could see people on the sidewalks who had clearly been watching the christening coverage on their phones or in shop windows. Some waved when they recognized the royal car, while others simply went about their daily lives. This contrast reminded Catherine of the strange duality of royal life: moments of intense public scrutiny, followed by attempts at normal family time. The car pulled through the gates of Kensington Palace, and Catherine felt her shoulders relax. For the first time all day, the familiar surroundings of their home offered a sense of safety and privacy that had been missing during the public ceremony. She looked forward to the quiet family reception that had been planned, where she could celebrate Helena's christening with their closest relatives and friends. Inside the palace, the atmosphere was warm and celebratory. Close family members had gathered in the drawing room. Catherine was touched to see that her parents had arrived ahead of them. Her mother immediately came over to check on both Catherine and Helena, offering the kind of support that only a grandmother could provide. The baby stirred slightly at the sound of familiar voices, but remained peacefully asleep. The christening cake, a beautiful creation that had been specially commissioned for the occasion, sat on a table surrounded by flowers from the palace gardens. Catherine admired the intricate details of the cake, which incorporated symbols representing different aspects of Helena's heritage and the hopes for her future. It was a far cry from the formal ceremony at Westminster Abbey, but it felt more personal and meaningful. As the afternoon progressed, Catherine found herself reflecting on the day's events. The emotional overwhelm she had experienced during the ceremony had surprised her, but she realized it had been a natural response to the magnitude of the moment. Watching Helena being welcomed into the church and formally presented to the world, it brought home the reality of her daughter's unique position in life. Prince George and Princess Charlotte arrived with their nanny. Having missed the formal ceremony due to their young ages, they were excited to see their baby sister and curious about all the attention she had received. Catherine enjoyed watching her older children interact with Helena, seeing the gentle way they approached their new sibling and the protective instincts that were already developing. The afternoon light streamed through the palace windows as the family gathered for informal photographs. These pictures would be kept private, capturing genuine moments of joy and family connection without the pressure of public scrutiny. Catherine felt more relaxed during this session, able to focus on her family rather than on maintaining a perfect public image. As evening approached, the guests began to leave, and Catherine finally had a quiet moment alone with Helena. She sat in the nursery holding her daughter and thinking about the day's events. The tears she had shed at Westminster Abbey no longer felt embarrassing or inappropriate. They had been an honest expression of love, hope, and the overwhelming responsibility of raising a royal child. Looking down at Helena's sleeping face, Catherine whispered quiet promises about the kind of mother she wanted to be. She promised to protect her daughter's childhood as much as possible, to teach her about her responsibilities while also allowing her to find her own path, and to always be there to support her through the challenges that lay ahead. The christening day had been a success, despite the emotional moments that had played out before the world. Catherine realized that showing her genuine feelings had perhaps made the royal family more relatable and human to the people who watched them. Her tears had not been a sign of weakness, but rather a testament to the deep love and commitment she felt toward her daughter. As the palace grew quiet and the day drew to a close, Catherine felt a sense of peace and completion. Princess Helena had been welcomed into the world with ceremony and celebration, surrounded by love and hope for her future. The public part of her royal life had begun. But tonight, she was simply a sleeping baby in her mother's arms, loved and protected by her family.